Thanks for tuning in to Written on the Edge, Season 7, Episode 24. I'm Vance Bastian here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins, and we're really glad you're here with us. On today's show, Hans M. Hirschi returns to discuss his latest novel, followed by our review of Fire Island, and then Baz and I will share what's held our attention this week, so stay tuned. If you like what we're doing, support us on Patreon, hit our merch store. But now let's move on to Hans. Hans writes books and stories that deal with things that are important to him. Family, relationships, everyday life of regular people in unexpected situations. They are mostly contemporary, inspiring feel-good fiction with unconventional but always hopeful or happy endings, because it's what he likes to read. He's not just an author, he's a public speaker, a training executive, a tour guide, and an activist on behalf of our LGBTQ plus siblings around the world. He loves to travel, as it often inspires his writing. And Hans has an amazing husband, Alex, a beautiful son, Sascha, 3 cats, and a bunch of fish that all live together on an island in the Gothenburg archipelago where they are car-free and mostly carefree. Hans, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. Shit, I missed that on the bio. We only have 2 cats now.
Oh, oops.
Sorry. Oops.
Sorry.
It's been almost... spiritually. Yeah. They're always here. Our gods are always with us in one way or another.
So you are a longtime friend of the show, but there may actually be listeners who haven't heard your first interviews. So if you could give us just a quick, 2-minute how you became an author, and we'll jump into your book.
Yeah. Okay. So not that people haven't heard that before, but I've always been writing. But it was, and I just recently looked at some of that old stuff from when I was 10, and it's embarrassingly bad. It's just thank goodness this is buried deeply in drawers. There was something about a Ken bar and a love story. I mean, it's just, who writes that shit, right? But anyway, yeah. So, and then when I got to college, it was mainly writing essays, that kind of good stuff. And then I wrote a couple of nonfiction books, one about e-learning, which became very popular at universities for a while, back way back when e-learning was just this new fad. And then I wrote a management handbook. And then when we got pregnant with our son, I finally got this break to write fiction, because I've always wanted to write, the great Swedish novel. And so I did.
Nice.
And it took me less than 2 weeks. So I just kept going. And
boy, that thing was bubbling inside you for a while.
Yes. No, I mean, it was insane. I wrote 2 1/4 novels in less than 3 months. It was insane. I really was on a roll back then. But I mean, and I have to say this, having learned the whole process since then about editing and proofing and editing some more and going back, that was just the first rough draft. I mean, that's when the really hard work starts. But yeah, when you type those first to the end, the first time after 2 weeks, that's I was on fire. I was really on the roll. And to this day, this is typically when I'm on a roll, that's how it works still to this very day.
Nice. So we're here today to talk about your most recent novel, but it has a precursor, right?
Yes.
Should we mention the precursor first?
Yes. Just and yeah, don't you love it? This is probably all mirrored for people.
No, it's fine.
It works for me.
No, is it fine? People cannot read this anyway. So anyway, yes. So my 4th novel, which I wrote back in 2014, is called The Fallen Angels of Karnataka. And I had set out, as you so nicely said in your introduction, I love to write about travel. So I was going to write this novel about this young kid who always wanted to go out and travel and see the world. And he does. So he's from Norway. His name is Håkon. And he finally decides, okay, so I'm going out on his first trip. He goes to London, which is not so far-fetched, because from Norway, it's kind of like, it's a hop across the North Sea, and you're in London, and Scandinavians travel a lot to London, which we just did. We were just there last weekend. And God, you hear Swedish every street corner. It's unbelievable.
That's awesome.
So he gets to London. He goes to Parliament Square at some point, and he meets this French guy kid. And they fall in love. They really hit it off. And then he has to go back. and doesn't hear from Michel anymore, Michel being the French kid. And then he finally gets a phone call from a hospital saying that Michel is hospitalized with pneumonia and that he has AIDS and he's dying. And Håkon gets on the first plane out to Paris and looks after Michel until he dies. And he dies on page 64 of the first book. And the reason why he had to go was because, as I said, it's page 64, where are we? Somewhere around here. So most of the book still had to be written, and there had to be a story. I couldn't have a story about traveling the world without with my main character being busy and in love in Paris. It just doesn't work. You don't travel that way. Besides, they're poor, both of them. Didn't really work. So that there was a ton of research to be done, and you had to get it right in terms of what was with the flights and all of that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And when AZT came around and the side effects and blah blah. So it was a lot of work. But anyway, when Michel died, none of that was available. There was no AZT. There was no nothing. There was they just showed up in hospitals with pneumonia. It was just a year or two after we had a name for the thing. Especially in the countryside, in a lot of places, people barely knew the disease was around. So I was just curious. So finally, 2 years ago, just before the pandemic hit, I said, okay, I need to write Michel's story. And I started to think about what would be the best way. How can you tell the story of somebody who's dead? And I said, well, maybe he left a diary behind. Mm-hmm. Maybe Håkon finds the diary somewhere. And interestingly enough, there are, I could say I'm a genius, but I'm not. I have to give credit to my subconscious, but somewhere along the line, I must have left little breadcrumbs in the original book for me to just then pick up. And so, but yeah, because once I decided to go with the diary story, and I talked to my publisher, and I said, do I do it first person or, kind of like, Dear Diary? No, that would be boring. So we decided, no, just write it third person, just do it what you write, but diary style. Mm-hmm. And I had to come up with an arc story, because the problem with the diary is, at some point, Michel would have gotten so sick. And I've had the same problem with a previous book called Disease, which is a book about a young man, youngish man. I'm still young, haven't I? No, I just turned 27 again for the 28th time. Right. Who suffers from early Alzheimer, which is why I'm 27 forever. I forget how old I am. And that was also written in the form of a diary, first person style. The problem is, when you suffer from dementia, at some point you won't be able to write anymore. You won't remember anything. Mm-hmm. So I had to find a different way to solve it. So in this book, the person's dead. And in order to understand everything that happens to Michel, I needed to get that outside perspective in. I've tried omniscient narrator before, and it works fine for some cases, but with the diary, it just doesn't work. So I came up with the arc story where Håkon sits on his island. His husband has to leave, go back to India, and there's a hurricane approaching, and so they get ready to board up the island and evacuate everybody. And so he's bored. So he sits there, he walks through his house, and he finds this diary that he hasn't read in forever. And he picks it up and he starts reading it. So that's kind of like the arc story of it all. But then it ends at the end, once Michel has passed away, it picks up again with the arc story with Håkon trying to find closure, mm-hmm. in a way, and getting the answers to all the things that he couldn't get back when. Because as was very common back in the 1980s, when you had a boyfriend or lover, as we called each other back then, usually or frequently, we were not known to the other family. We right. We were not in contact because it was all clandestine. We were not out. It was all the hush hush. And so even though Håkon actually met Michel's parents, they didn't really know who he was, and they probably didn't care. So when Michel died, they hauled his body off to their hometown and did away with it, as was common back then. It was all because the parents were ashamed. They didn't want to have a gay son, and so this is what this book is all about. Really, so we meet Michel when he's relatively young through his childish point of view at the beginning, which I kind of condensed because it's not very interesting. Who wants to read about a 7-year-old? And then as we see him grow up and come out, and he gets to know the local gay community, he's being rescued by an older gentleman who picks him up, lingering around outside the only gay bar in town, and he kind of picks him up and introduces him to everybody. And so we see him as he goes through his young life, as he approaches his high school graduation, and then moves to Paris. And interestingly, he meets Håkon the year he actually moves to Paris to start his studies. So he's really, they're so young, those kids. It was incredible. And so shit happens, along as his life. He doesn't have an easy life. His parents are deeply Catholic, with all that entails, and so there's some interesting, deep stuff in there for people to dig into.
Well, my first question, and this is sparked by a blog post you wrote, did you get your closure with this story?
I don't know.
That's fair.
I honestly don't know. I mean, this is hard. I mean, I have the scene where Michel dies on that park bench opposite the Eiffel Tower is probably one of my most beautiful things I've ever written. And I've never been able to read that out loud without crying, and I still can't. And so there's a lot of stuff in the new book too that are a lot of scenes that are tearjerkers for many, many different. There's beautiful stuff in there. There's some really heavy stuff in there, very romantic scenes. But for some reason, because his death to me was so tragic, I could never really let go of him.
Mm-hmm.
And this is weird, and people are probably going to go all psychiatrist on me over this, but I have never grieved a person as much as I have grieved Michel in my life, not even my own mother.
Wow.
And people could say, what's wrong with you? I mean, your mother was a real life person. But, tell that to our brains, because to our brains, real people, fictional people, they're all the same, right? I mean, it's all neurons firing.
Mm-hmm.
And while I grieve my mother in my own way, but because she died of Alzheimer, her passing was this really, really, really long time. I mean, I came back from my high school year in the US in 1986, the same year Michel passed. And I came back to my mother already suffering from the early stages of dementia. Mm-hmm. She died in 2013. So my taking my leave from my mother was like this 30-year process. Whereas with Michel, it was like, boom, he's gone. And you experience it as you type out the sentence, Michel was no more. That was how it ends. Yeah, here's the funny thing. The writing Michel was different from any other book that I have written in the past. Mm-hmm. I'm usually what people would consider a pantser, or I have been a pantser, very much so. I mean, at the beginning, it was like, just 2 weeks and the book was done, more or less. Just kind of as a stream of consciousness, if that might work as an explanation. But with Michel, I had certain ideas. So I started writing him very, very early on in 2020. I wrote down certain things. So what are some of the cues that I could use? Because when I started writing the book, he didn't really talk to me. So that stream of consciousness didn't really flow easily. So I just started jogging down some ideas. Okay, so fight with his parents, first visit to the gay club, first sexual encounter, first this, first that, or I need to write about this, or I need to write about that. I need to write about his time with Håkon in Paris that summer, which is very condensedly written in the first book. But now from his point of view, I want to write some scenes too. So there was all of this. And then I started to flesh it out. I started to write, and that's the good thing about writing in diary style. You can write, this is what happened on that day. So you just write that scene, boom, you're done.
It's
and
linear in that way.
Then you can write something that happened years later or years earlier, and yada, yada, yada. And it wasn't until last summer when my consulting gig ended and I came home that suddenly I was in my zone. And I was in my zone, I'm telling you guys, in a way I had never been before. I was manic. I was leaving my family, literally eating at the table. I had to rush away and write something that had just popped into my mind. I just had to. I just could not. I was writing, for about 10 days, I wrote 80% of the book in less than a week. But virtually 24/7. It was insane. It even scared me for a while. But then when you were done, I had a mountain of editing to do because, I was talking about the same things several times in things that I had written a year before. So it all had to go out. And then I felt like, there's something missing here. And there's something missing there. So for the first time ever in my editing process, I added at least 20,000 words. Just because I felt there's something missing here, or this isn't fleshed out, this has to go, this has. So it's been a very, very different process in terms of writing. But did I know what I would write? I can give you one example. At some point, I sat down and I figured, so Michel comes back from his military service. He's had a really bad experience with losing someone he was close to who committed suicide. And he comes home and I was like, it would be kind of nice. Wouldn't it be nice if he made up with his mom at least, Wouldn't that be nice, I'm the queen of unconventional happy endings. Wouldn't it be nice, So I sat down and I was like, okay. So the mom walks into the door. They start talking and I was like, oh, that's so nice. They're finally connecting and he sees that she's being honest. The bitch didn't do it, and then all of a sudden she goes off on her homophobic tangents again, and the good mood goes out the window, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing here now? So what's happening here? And I'm typing away and I'm reading this and I'm like, oh my God. So so the scene basically ends with Michel asking, so she tells him, well, if you meet the right girl, you just have met the right girl. Yeah. And he turns around and says, Mom, if you'd met the right girl, would you have turned lesbian? And she slaps him on the face and leaves. That's how that scene runs. So no, not much of a happy ending there, like a day or two before he goes to Paris. But he learns something about a new woman, a woman who's just moved into the parish, and he's kind of curious. So he walks over there and meets her. And I write my subconscious, because I was just literally sitting there reading as I was typing. I had this beautiful scene when he walks up to that woman's house and he meets her and has to learn about her son's tragic demise and the reason why they had to move across the country. I had no idea this was going to be in the book. Absolutely. I swear to God, I had no idea. It just came to me. Just suddenly, and it's in the paper. I love it. It's an amazing scene. But yeah, so instead of making up with his mom or just not going to happen, which is kind of sticks with the overall theme because, they slap him and they bury him
right
without anybody knowing about it.
Right. What would you like folks to know about the book?
Well, it has a happy ending, happy-ish.
Happy for Hans.
Yeah, happy for no. Well, hey, they call me the queen of unconventional happy endings for a reason. Because if you write about pedophiles and you pull off a happy ending, that's when you get the title from your publisher.
Nice.
So my publisher bestowed this honorific upon me at the end of this book.
Nice.
And it was really nice. I was just in London and everybody was celebrating me. I loved it. I have to go to London more often. They love the Queen. I don't know why, but it was really amazing. So, as dark as this is, so there's suicide, there's sexual abuse at the hand of priests, at the hand of soldiers. There's a lot of darkness in this book. But it also has, first of all, a really amazing love story. The love between Håkon and Michel is for the history books. Which is really interesting. That was another one of my challenges. Is it okay to love again? Because Håkon obviously now is married to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that? How do you deal with second chances? And so if you want to find out how I did it, you'll just have to go and read it, or listen to it. But so I'm very pleased with this one.
That's awesome.
Plus, it has the most gorgeous cover, doesn't it?
That is a gorgeous
You've got to
cover.
love the angel. The angel is...
I do. I love it very much.
From a tomb of a mayor in Wuppertal in Germany from the 1890s.
Oh, wow.
I just, oh God, this is... I want that angel in my backyard. Can I have him? I'll just travel down there.
We'll contact the authorities about that. Yeah.
So what's up next for you? What are you working on?
Nothing.
Ooh.
I'm in this weird limbo post. I'm in this
recharging.
You're recharging.
Post-coital, book-coital, when I just wait
you're
for...
recharging.
Yes. So we're like I said at the beginning, we're flying stateside next week. We're flying out to Denver, and I'm going on. So we're driving 3,500 miles from Denver to San Francisco.
Wow.
So we're going we're going from Denver up to Wyoming for one reason and one reason only. Can you guess? No, Vance?
Liz Cheney convention? I don't know.
No. There's only room for one queen in Wyoming, and that would be me.
Right. Okay. Right.
No, we're going up there because I have to go to this tiny. Well, there's two reasons. There's a tiny little town where I set the golden one.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. So I want to see it because I haven't been there. So, and after we've been there, taking some pictures, we'll then go off to Laramie to obviously pay our respects to Matthew. And then we go down again to Colorado and I visit one of the sets of Disease. And then we go down to Arizona with my son, which is my home state. And then I visit my sister in Tucson. And then we go up to the Grand Canyon. We go to Vegas. We go to Big Pine and Yosemite. And we do, what's the Lake Tahoe? And then we do, Carmel, where there's more books. So I think in total, I'll visit 5 book sets.
Wow.
Which I'm really looking forward to. So it's kind of like a bookish tour.
A book tour.
Yeah.
A book tour. Yeah, a book tour. To take pictures of all. I've been to some of them.
What I want is I want to make sure that whenever you step out into these places for the first time, I want someone to film it and you go, God, I got it all wrong.
Oh.
No. No. Her Majesty doesn't get things wrong.
Well, see, that's the thing. You have these people who are creatives. Like, we were watching, I think it was Tales of the City, my husband and I. And, of course, we lived in San Francisco. And so, it was just funny because they, walk along a block and turn the corner, and they're in a completely different part of San Francisco. And you're like,
yeah, of course,
okay, unless there's a portal there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons why the Golden One isn't set in a real town. Mm-hmm. I never actually mentioned the name of the town.
Right.
But I needed certain props to be there. Mm-hmm. Distances to major metropolis and stuff like that.
A cabin up in the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are no mountains there, but what the fuck? I mean, that's why it's not actually set in Torrington, Wyoming, which is my prop site. But because I know that if you were to, it's like I'm watching Smallville right now as one of those mindless things to watch. And there are mountains in Kansas. You can see the Rocky Mountains.
Well, and it's also 20 miles from Metropolis on the Atlantic coast.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's so much that's so way out there.
Right.
But it's just so amazing, I mean, Hey, they get away with it. But as a writer, I mean, you guys both know that we would never get away with that.
Right.
Unfortunately, in a book, an error like that wouldn't fly. So it's kind of like make-believe land, but I had to base it on a real town somewhere.
So what social is the best for people to follow what you are working on or see some of the pictures of your trip?
It would be Facebook.
Okay.
If I honestly don't. I mean, people still find me. So there's a bug on my Facebook profile, which is like, I tried to create an author page in Swedish for reasons. And that thing kind of warped up my author profile. So if you look for me and you can't find me on a desktop, because that's the only place where the bug shows up, people cannot actually find my profile on the desktop. It doesn't work. On the mobile, on the app, it works, and Facebook knows, but does the sucker man care? No, of course not. Oh. But yeah, that's where I am, and it's where I write about my life and my books and my trips. And so, yeah, I've given up on Twitter years ago. Right. And then I tried Instagram for a while, but I'm just not pretty enough without my clothes on, so it just wasn't worth it.
Oh.
You want to see? No. I don't want to scare you.
Wait, we aren't that kind of show, are we? No.
Hey,
no.
You want to get clicks? Hey.
All right. Any final words of wisdom?
Well, yeah, come see me July 11th, San Francisco, with the Queer Readings group.
Nice.
We'll put it up on Facebook, but I'm doing a reading at the Fabulosa Books on July 11th. Rick is doing this for me. I'm really looking forward to actually meeting real people again for the first time in a long time, and doing I did a public reading at the Tennessee Williams Festival, the Sauce Festival, which was fun and cool, but yeah, this is going to be different, more intimate.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Hans M. Hirschi for being with us. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators, so if you enjoy learning about these artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. If you'd like to hear this full interview, please check out our Patreon.
Hey, gals, gays, and theys. So here we are for our review this week. And this week we are hitting up a gay retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, known as Fire Island. A pair of best friends set out to have a legendary week-long summer vacation with the help of a cheap rosé and a group of eclectic friends. We've all been there.
Oh, I haven't. That's the problem. I haven't been there.
Oh no, we're going to have one of those I don't get it reviews. All right, so we're talking about Fire Island. It was written by Joel Kim Booster, who is absolutely one of my favorite comedians. I just think he is funny as shit. It just, not that shit's funny, but, he's really, really funny. I love his brand of humor, the way that he structures his humor. I just find him very infectious. Anyway, so I was really chuffed to see this because I think as his first foray into writing a movie, it knocks it out of the park. He ticks all the boxes for me, and he does. You spend about the only criticism I have is that you spend a bit of time watching, going, okay, that's Lizzie, and then that one's Jane, and then that one is, you start trying, if you know Pride and Prejudice, you immediately try drawing the strings to the original, characters from Jane Austen, and you're trying to see how those are playing out in the version of it.
Mhm.
So that is about the only thing that took me out of the fact that I was in that spiral. So I'll probably have to watch it again to just enjoy it. But, you know, because I was spending so much time going, oh, that's that character. And oh, that's that character, you know, so
Mhm.
yeah. So what did you think?
I enjoyed it. That's not a bad
That's
thing.
as good as it's going to get, folks.
It's light. Okay, I'll give you both sides of my comment then. It is light, fluffy brain candy. It is predictable, down to the two pairings at the end, predictable, but it's still warm and fuzzy, and the sunset is amazing, and you know everybody rides off into it happy and smiling in their
And
own
Last Dance is the last song in it.
And The Last Dance is the last song. You know, the downside, I was watching this, having never been to Fire Island myself, but watching this with some sort of weird conservative religious nag over my shoulder who went, "This is what's wrong with all the gays. We didn't need to put this up there." I went, "Go away." But I as much as I want
Is that
a
Midwest thing? Because
no,
I had none of that.
No, I recently got a look in a grocery store thing, so it's preying on my mind that there are still haters out there. And I love this movie enough that I don't want it to become fuel for haters. And it shows some of the gay culture at its gayest, shall we say, most sexual.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it could be fuel for haters if they wanted to take it that way. And that's what worries.
You know what?
That's what
Those
worries me
haters
about
are going to hate even if two guys just look at each other.
I know, but that's what worries me. I don't want this to get attacked because it's cute.
I can't spend my life worrying about what haters are going to hate. I just can't. I'm over that. You know. So I get what you're saying, but for me, it's like the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, I know I have so many friends who are like this, you know, who are circuit queens, and you know, I get that part of it, but I also loved how Bowen Yang played Howie, because he was the emotional heart, like Jane Bennett in the original story. He was the emotional heart of it all. What I did find was interesting because I was watching this whole thing and I'm thinking to myself, I started spinning ahead in the story going, okay, wait a minute. At the end, Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy get married. And so I started thinking, okay, so plotting in my head, I kept going, okay, so they're going to get together and he's rich, so he's going to buy the house that belongs to, you know, so I started spinning.
I was expecting that
this
piece.
whole other tale.
Yep.
Yeah. So there wasn't a surprise in that it doesn't go there.
Yeah, it doesn't pattern the original, yes.
Yes. But my favorite part in the whole movie, it's really kind of a throwaway, but fucking loved it. Joel Kim Booster's character comes to the house with all the rich white fags. When he walks in, there's this one guy who's constantly on the staircase and just goes, "Can I help you?" And he's like, "Really, bitch? I was here last night." And you're acting like you don't know me. And that is my favorite, because every time it happens, Joel's character Noah gets a little more pissed off at it. I love that. I love that arc more than anything in the whole movie. I do have to say, shout out to Joel for putting together a Asian. It's also kind of like Crazy Rich Asians, but you know, it's the poor kids and how they struggle to get through it all. And so in that respect, I kind of like that it had the racism, the invisibility of people of color. It also had the classism, the privilege. You know, and so it hit all those bells and whistles that are sort of part of the story. The racism, not so much, because it's pretty much all white in the traditional story, but you do get the classism and all that kind of stuff. And I did like that this eclectic group of friends, which is the chosen family, which is the family of the Bennetts, that you have all the colors represented. Even there's a white guy in the middle of it all too. So, you know, it is this fully fleshed family. And I really liked that was one of the elements. And if you really kind of took away all the over-sexualized stuff, not that we're shaming any of it, but if you took it all away, the movie had a ton of heart.
It did. It absolutely did.
So, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give my ratings. You ready for ratings?
Let's do it.
I'm going to give my ratings. They're 5s across the board, with the exception of script and screenplay. Even though I loved Joel Kim Booster's screenplay, I loved it. But again, it took me out because I kept spinning myself out trying to identify the original characters within the new characters, and then trying to play out offshoot storylines that I know sort of existed in the other story. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the only caveat in this, is that if you're a Jane Austen fan, you're going to spin. It's hard not to. So that's mine. My overall is a 4.75.
All right. Well, fortunately, I was able to set aside my Jane Austen. Production quality, I give it a 4.5. It is well done with, and I'll get to the lighting thing in a second. Script, screenplay, I gave it a 5 for all of the reasons Baz just said. He played with class disparity. He played with race. And also within the core group of friends, there's a different type of gay represented in each character. You know, Howie's just sort of the normal guy. Noah is the circuit queen. I mean, the buff workout guy. Luke was the white guy who, you know, just kind of was there. What was the name of the Keegan, right? Was the really flamboyant, treading into like gender fluid territory. But then Margaret Cho as Erin, the lesbian who owned the house. I mean, beautiful mix of all the types of gays. It wasn't just one type. So screenplay, I did give it a 5 for that reason. Also, I didn't get stuck in Jane Austen land. Sound lighting score, I brought that down to a 4, not for the score, but for the lighting. There were several scenes where, yes, that's probably how a nightclub feels in terms of so dark you can't see who's touching whom. But to an audience, a little bit more light would have been appreciated.
I'm exactly the opposite. I'm at the point where they go into these nightclubs and it's like fucking neon lights and it's just so over. I'm like going, bitch, it's not like that.
But I would have liked to have seen. There was one dark scene where I couldn't actually tell which two characters were talking. That I felt was
but that's kind of how it is, you know. I mean,
but sometimes I don't need that much realism in a movie that's a rom-com already. I need
I don't know. I get your point though, but yeah.
Yeah, if this had been a dark, hard-hitting docudrama, totally fine. That's exactly right. It wasn't that, so I felt a little more lighting would have been appreciated. Case Rossero. Art, direction, costuming 4, didn't get away with anything. It felt perfect. Casting 5, I think everybody did a beautiful job. Like blew it out of the park. Beautiful. Directing 4, again, story was told. I didn't see the director's hand, which is a good thing. Queer themes presented 5. There were an awful lot of queer themes presented here, including some non-consensual sexual stuff that went to video, which is becoming a real problem in the world. Porn. Yeah, revenge porn. So my personal overall, when you factor those in, came to 4.75.
So you landed in the same place. All right, everybody. We encourage you to see it. It's on Hulu. It's great fun. It's a great Pride season movie.
Yes.
So definitely take it in. Make some popcorn, gather some friends, and just do a drinking game every time he goes to the White House. Every time the guy asks, "Can I help you?" Shot. There, I set it up for you.
There you go.
All right, everybody. That's it for this week's review.
So, who won your week?
Who won my week this week? I have to say this week, it is Jamie Raskin, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, and the crew of the January 6th committee, which, as we tape this on Thursday, we are going to get our first public hearing. And I think this will be, if it's done right, and I trust Jamie Raskin and crew that they've put their ducks in a row very carefully. I think this is going to be an epic revelation of how deep this conspiracy went. Like Watergate level and maybe even bigger. So they've won my week because we are now going public.
Yep.
So, good on them.
All right, so since you took the political one, I'll take the environmental one. I don't know that I can pick a specific person. I think this was the result of a lot of people working together. But Galveston Island State Park in Texas found their first Kemp's Ridley sea turtle nest in 10 years. It's been 10 years since they've seen one of these sea turtle nests, and they finally saw them. So that indicates a lot of cleanup, a lot of beach safety, a lot of ocean cleanup as well. Like I said, a lot of people should be congratulated for this because that's huge in terms of our ecosystem.
Yep.
So
we only got one planet, kids. You got to take care of it.
So we need to keep seeing stories like this because that means people are doing the work.
All right. Well, there you go, kids. That's it for this week. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We're going to be having an announcement soon for our Pride series of new t-shirts that I've got going up and new swag. Mm-hmm. We are working with a new provider who actually is local in presence around the world, so people can get our merch very quickly. Yep. So it's a great way for you to be reacquainted with our swag and to support the podcast.
All right, folks. Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our list of stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.roadpodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about new artists or seeing old artists come back and share their new works with us, like and subscribe so you get the alerts for our new episodes. Tune in next week for your queer media fix. Bye, everybody.
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.